I'm Peter Austin. These are all objects made from human remains, and this is interesting. We'll go through each one, see if you can guess what they are from the silhouettes. First though, let's talk about anthropodermic bibliopegy. Though I'd already been aware of the concept for some years, I first heard the term itself in around 2017 in an episode of the gothic detective show Whitechapel, a spectacularly macabre program which, in this particular episode, featured the phenomenon of processing pieces of human skin to produce leather and using it to bind books, hence anthropodermic bibliopegy. A rather unbelievable notion, you might think, very much the stuff reserved for grisly fiction like Whitechapel. Well, don't be so sure. Let's take a closer look at the world of human leather and other gruesome produce. It's important to know going into this video that while there are many historical objects actually confirmed to be made from various human body bits, there are also plenty of far more dubious claims. Take the 20th century mouthful, Cadaververwertungsanstalt. Mouthful might not be the best choice of word there, actually, given that the concept refers to a claim made in World War I that the German Empire were in the habit of recycling the fat of their own fallen soldiers. Not something anyone would like a mouthful of, thank you very much. Cadaververwertungsanstalt literally means words to the effect of cadaver recycling facility, but the term was actually invented by the Allies as a piece of what's called atrocity propaganda, designed to discredit and demonize the enemy. This cartoon from Punch magazine in 1917 shows a so-called corpse factory in the background and was captioned, "And don't forget that your Kaiser will find a use for you, alive or dead." According to the claims, the fictional claims let's remember, the fat rendered from bodies recovered from the battlefields was used to produce nitroglycerin for explosives, waterproofing wax for leather, and even candles and soap for those who, didn't mind washing themselves with the remains of a fallen comrade. I'm told by an eminent chemist that 6 pounds of glycerin can be extracted from the corpse of a fairly well-nourished Hun, goes one comment from the time. It's easy to call it all very ridiculous now that we know it was propaganda, but this did actually happen in 18th century France. According to an early issue of Scientific American magazine, the former Holy Innocents Cemetery in Paris was excavated in 1786 after it had been determined to be overfull. The bodies were to be moved to the city's famous catacombs, but it was discovered on exhumation of the remains that large fat deposits had built up during the decomposition process, and this material was reportedly harvested and turned into both candles and soap. And that's the thing, half the battle when establishing the validity of claims like this is working out whether it would even be technically possible to use human remains in such processes. I mean, would you even know exactly how soap or book leather is really made, even using animal products in the normal way? Well, I learned exactly that, and a whole lot more besides, in a book that fortunately has a more conventional binding, albeit a very beautiful one, and it's the sponsor of today's video. This is the book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, and it is absolutely brilliant. I can honestly say I was over the moon when Hungry Minds got in touch with me about this, because I'd actually had my eye on a copy for a while. There are so many levels to the way you can enjoy this thing. Obviously, everyone's immediate reaction is how gorgeous the illustrations are, and even how nice the paper and bindings feel, but it's not just a pretty face. This is a deep, deep rabbit hole. At first glance, you'll see it's full of the sort of practical knowledge you'd expect from its title, but the more you leaf through it, the more you learn about history, science, art, culture, all the kinds of things we cover on this channel, really. Clearly I need to do a video on oyster farming at some point. So yes, there are great sections on soap making or how animal hides are turned into leather, but there's also stuff on dice games and automatons and perpetual motion machines, and all with this Jules Vernean sort of aesthetic. I love it. It's packed with pop culture references too. I've seen Star Wars, Game of Thrones, lots of video game characters in here, and actually if you like games, there's actually an even deeper layer to this book. Behind all the stunning artwork, there's also a whole section of puzzles hidden in its pages. And I really do mean hidden, I've still got loads left to find. So there really is something for everyone here. Genuinely useful survivalist information, beautiful illustrations, brilliant puzzles. So it would make a really good gift for someone, adult or child, or of course you could just buy a copy for yourself. So why not do exactly that and get yourself 10% off by visiting the link in the description or scanning the QR code and using code PeterAustin10 at checkout. Thanks again, Hungry Minds, for my copy. I'm absolutely made up with it. But let's get back to our mystery items though, because as I've deduced from information in the book and elsewhere, it is absolutely possible to turn human fat into soap and candles, and yes, if there was the desire, you could also turn human skin into leather for book bindings. And that's exactly what happened to these two men, and a fair few others throughout history too. Arguably the most famous case of anthropodermic bibliopeggy is that of William Burke, one half of the infamous pair Burke and Hare, who in 1828 killed at least 16 people in Edinburgh in order to sell their remains to anatomist Robert Knox for his educational dissections. This was a huge industry at the time, as there was a relatively high demand for cadavers from anatomists and medical schools wanting to study the human body. Perhaps it's fitting then that when Burke was hanged for one of the murders, he himself was dissected, and some of his skin was used to make a leather pocketbook, as well as this calling card case. And if any of you guessed calling card case from the silhouette, by the way, you give yourselves a pat on the back. This is by no means a unique story, though. The same sort of circumstances surround the origins of this book, which documents the crime, trial, and execution of murderer John Horwood, whose own skin was used to make the leather. And it didn't always stop at bookbinding either. In 1809, a woman in Yorkshire by the name of Mary Bateman was hanged for poisoning a neighbour. A few years earlier, though, she'd made a bit of a name for herself as a fortune teller and wise woman, partly by charging people to see the so-called prophet hen of Leeds, literally a chicken that would supposedly lay eggs emblazoned with the words, "Christ is coming." Now, in truth, Bateman was carving the words into the eggs and then reinserting them into the chicken. But anyway, long story short, when she was eventually executed for that aforementioned murder, her skin was tanned into leather and then sold off as strips, not to be used for bookbinding, but rather as charms to ward off black magic. In short, there have been many claims made about tanned human skin right across the world over hundreds of years of history, and while some are tall tales and others rely largely on testimony from people who were supposedly there at the time, a fair few items, such as the John Horwood book for example, have been proven to be made from human leather thanks to a process called peptide mass fingerprinting. So, thanks to at least a couple of cases, we can now say with certainty that books bound in human leather are more than just an urban myth. Perhaps you'll think twice next time about licking your finger before turning the page. I've been Peter Austin, and that was interesting.